The coming Trump administration has promised to institute all sorts of efficiencies in the government. Now a bill from Senator Roger Wicker, Republican of Mississippi, would do just that. The Forged Act focuses on defense procurement, and for analysis of what's in it, we turn to the president and CEO of the Professional Services Council, David Berteau. And this is really going much further than the NDAA with its Title 800 procurement reforms year after year. This is kind of a big, important bill, isn't it, David?
It's a big step, Tom. And of course, Senator Wicker, when he introduced the bill in December, was the ranking member of the Senate Armed Service Committee. But now in January, he's the chairman in the 119th Congress. And so his words will have a lot to do with what gets into the bill when they start marking up later this year. And this is a big acquisition reform bill. Anytime you open up a bill with 144 pages, you say to yourself, okay, there must be something in here or else it wouldn't take this long to write. Right. And it's a key starting point. Obviously, the bill itself was introduced in December. It died with the end of the 118th Congress, so it has to be reintroduced. But we're taking his proposal very, very seriously.
Yes, because there have been no shortage of proposals from congressionally chartered commissions. Right on my desk, I've got a big, heavy March 2024 report now, Commission on Planning, Programming, Budgeting, and Execution Reform. And I don't think there's been a whole lot of action after that one. There was the Section 809 Commission, this one, that one, but nothing seems to really get pushed very far. So maybe this bill could start the ball rolling.
Well, Tom, I've spent most of my career in Washington in the middle of acquisition reform, and you could ask yourself, if we've done that much reform, why do we still have so many problems? And the reality is that there is a lot of change that is implemented, but it's rare that it's a comprehensive package. And I think what Senator Wicker has attempted to do in his proposed legislation, and it has a report, a document going with it that explains it, is to take a more comprehensive look. And I think there's three elements of what he's proposing here that merit very serious consideration. One, and you've seen this a lot on your show over the past few years, is this focus on outside innovation. That is, startup companies that bring something that potentially is valuable to the government and to national security in particular, that don't go through the normal process of the existing industries and the hardware manufacturing process. There's a lot of promise in a lot of these. There's a lot of venture capital money has gone into it. There's a lot of private equity money has gone into it. And the real question is, can you buy stuff fast enough? Your PPBE Commission report that you just referred to there, at its core, talks about it takes so long for the federal government to decide it wants something, put the money in the budget, get Congress to appropriate it, get OMB to apportion it out so you've got the money, and then compete a contract and evaluate the proposals and award. That's a 3-year cycle done fast. Right. And the cycle time of innovation is much shorter than that. So that's a big part of Senator Wicker's bill that really merits consideration.
And if I'm reading the bill correctly, and it is a long bill, there are dozens and dozens of Title 10 provisions now in law that would be repealed right away.
That's the most striking element of the 35 pages of things to get rid of. Some of them go back, Tom, to 1975, which is even before I came to Washington. Now, the analyst in me says, before I agree to all those, I really have to look at the details of what each one does and how it's being implemented. For example, there's a proposal in there to sunset all requirements for congressional reports after 5 years, unless Congress acts to continue those reports. I know from my time in the Pentagon that many of those reports serve two purposes. One is they help Congress stay informed. The other is they actually help the Secretary of Defense be aware of and manage what's going on in the department, because without the congressional reporting requirement, oftentimes you don't get the data at all. And so that congressional reporting requirement serves both the executive branch and the legislative branch. That needs to be looked at carefully before those are gotten rid of.
We're speaking with David Berteau, President and CEO of the Professional Services Council. And what's your sense of how much bite this bill would have in Congress? I mean, if everyone was looking at one of the things it would repeal, you'd need 400 people to just read each of the each read one provision and say, here's what this all means.
Well, luckily we do have time. It's early January, and we won't have markup at the Senate Armed Service Committee for the FY26 National Defense Defense Authorization Act until, probably April, maybe even a little bit later than that. So there is time to do the work carefully and well. Senator Wicker is obviously in the right position to do it. I suspect that a good set of recommendations will have broad bipartisan support, and we look forward to working with the committee and the staff as they finalize this and work it into the bill.
All right. And as this bill might get reintroduced and we're going to have a new administration in just a few short days, the government itself has not really got its act together on the budget front. We're still in a continuing resolution, and we don't really understand the status of 2026 development.
Boy, you've hit the nail on the head there. I mentioned that Senator Wicker and the Armed Services Committee will be marking up the FY26 National Defense Authorization Act. But the biggest single question about that is to what number? What top line number for defense, right? We have an agreement. It was part of the Fiscal Responsibility Act that was passed back in June of 2023. That was our last debt limit fight, by the way. That deal put caps in place, but only for FY24 and FY25. It was noteworthy that the FY25 NDAA, which passed right before Christmas and was signed by the president, stuck with those caps. The CRs are basically sticking with those caps because they're at the 24 level, which was covered by the caps. But we don't have a final FY25. More importantly, you can't expect the executive branch to propose an FY26 budget until they know where they are in 25. And that'll be March 14th at the earliest. That's when the CR ends. The incoming Trump administration inherited a 26 budget that was put together by the outgoing Biden administration. But I don't know to what number. It's certainly not to a number that Congress has agreed to. So there's 3 layers of uncertainty there. Where do we finish 25? How does that get incorporated into 26? And most importantly, will there be a cap in 26 for defense and non-defense? We don't know the answer to that. Maybe the first reconciliation bill will have to address that.
Well, one thing we do know, or we're seeing in a general way, is that the Trump team that is coming in seems to be more thorough and prepared than it was the last time around. And I've heard this from several landing team people that, spoke on the condition of anonymity. And I've heard from some senior executives that are on the receiving end of the landing teams. So I guess we can hope maybe that they'll have some picture in mind when they do take over the Defense Department of what they want for 2026, and they'll have some time to maybe shape it.
That level of preparation that you mentioned is a really key point here. Tom, we're in very rare territory here where a president and his team served 4 years, then are out for 4 years, then come back. And it's pretty clear from the statements and the preparation that they spent a lot of that 4-year interregnum getting ready to think about what they would do if and when they were to win another term. And I think that's showing up in all of the comments that they're making there. That doesn't necessarily make the path any easier with Congress, but it is important that they have a clear idea. But the most important thing about the Pentagon budget, and in fact true for other federal agencies as well, is you can't put next year's together until you know what this year's is, because that's always your starting point. You'll go back all the way to President Carter, God rest his soul. He did what was called zero-based budgeting. Let's ignore last year and start from scratch and build your budget from scratch. It didn't work. It's just too hard and complicated.
No, that's one of those management concepts that sounds great on paper, but anyone actually working in an ongoing organization knows how kind of silly that is.
Right. We couldn't even do our household budget by starting from scratch. You've got expenses that are cooked in, and you have to keep them going. But the real problem is we don't have enough time, right? If you go back again to Senator Wicker's bill, part of his focus is we need to go faster. We need to get new technology in. We need to get, and this is true not only in DOD, but across the federal government. You hear it on your show virtually every day, an agency that needs to be able to move faster. Well, you don't move faster by going slower.
David Berteau is president and CEO of the Professional Services Council. We know you'll spur them on. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Tom, and we look forward to rapid progress here.
All right, and we'll post this interview along with a link to the Forged Act. You can read it for yourself at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.